I'm ready to talk to my guest about current issue. So now I'm glad to introduce my guest, Hary Tabach, the captain of the first rank of the U.S. Navy. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, Hary.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Caroline. It's a pleasure to join you in this program.
Thank you. So, and I do hope that we will find a solution and you will help me and my audience to understand better what is going on with the help, with the aid for Ukraine. Okay?
Well, it's very complicated because, but thank you for this opportunity because it started with originally almost a year and a half ago. On the 9th of May, President Biden signed a Lend-Lease agreement, which didn't go any further than that. There was no plan created. There was a lot of, I think, disinformation about it in Ukraine. So Ukrainians never really got that program, which was one out of 4 programs that were introduced, including the presidential drawdown, allocated for it. Then somehow our Pentagon miscalculated over $6 billion in 1 year that was supposed to be that were allocated for Ukraine. It appeared to me that there were like 2 grand babushkas are sitting there in a basement of a Pentagon with an abacus and made the $6 billion mistake. And nobody was responsible for it. And eventually it came now to a situation where many people in the United States said, listen, we've been giving over $100 billion to Ukraine, according to the administration, and said that there was going to be an offensive, that the Ukrainians are going to free Crimea, that there's going to be all these things, that they're going to get airplanes, tanks, and all these things, but yet they didn't get anything, and there's really no advancement. It seems to us as though there is a war of attrition is going on, and if there is a war of attrition, then of course Ukrainians will lose. And when Prigozhin was marching towards Moscow, I believe Mr. Blinken came out and warned the Ukrainians not to conduct any military operations against Russia, particularly on the Russian territory. Let Russia stabilize itself.
Yes,
Putin
it was very
settle.
unfair.
Then,
yes, I remember it's very well, and it was like shock. So okay, we have Ukraine have to stay. Ukraine have to wait for something, not to destroy. Right. Not to strike.
Well, usually
Russia. That's the same time.
As a military man, I can tell you this is exactly what we wait for. We wait for a while there's something going wrong in an enemy camp, and that's when you strike. This is, I think, obvious, but Ukrainians were prevented from it, as they were in 2014, prevented by the same administration not to defend Crimea and to give it up, and and then, of course, they started to defend Donbass. So now it came to a point where the Republicans took slight power or slightly more members in our lower house of representatives, and they said, okay, well, we can't give any more money to Ukraine unless we have some sort of a plan. We need a plan. Okay, we're going to give more money. What kind of weapons are this money going to get Ukraine? Because just giving money in the packages where there is gender education, building roads, making movies, rebuilding American embassy, all these things are included in it that have nothing to do with defending Ukraine or weaponry, besides just a little bit of artillery. And we want a plan. If we're giving money, then those packages should be spread apart. That first we vote on a package for military aid to Ukraine. Then we vote on other packages that are involved. And Democrats said no. The Senate said no on it because in those packages they were combined. It was help for Ukraine. How much of a military help is not clear. Then I think over $300 million or $500 million were given to the Ukrainian internal forces to fight corruption. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You're giving a drug dealer gives a drug addict narcotics to stop taking narcotics. That's the way I can compare it to. And then, of course, what happened, they said, okay, let's split those packages so everybody knows who votes for what instead of blaming it. Just because you put a title on it, assistance to Ukraine, but in that package, there's very little that goes to Ukraine, then it's really, fooling people in it. And then if you don't vote for it, they say, okay, well, you don't want to help Ukraine. So this time, now we have Israel on top of everything. So there's got to be aid to Israel. And Democrats want to put aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, aid to Palestinian Authority, and build the wall, building the wall on our southern borders, all in one package. The Republicans don't want that. Republicans saying, no, let's vote first on Israel. And they voted in the lower house of representatives in our Congress for it, for $14 billion, I believe. Then we'll vote right away. And Speaker of the House said he agrees on whatever, $40 billion for Ukraine to vote. And then we vote on the other things. So we all can see who votes for what and what includes in those packages, not bundling them all up. So that became a showstopper. And of course, we haven't voted on the budget of the United States yet. And now the Congress is in a recession. They're on vacation. So now then we're going to have Christmas holidays, and then they're going to be on vacation, New Year's holidays. So this is all, of course, stopping and preventing. But the idea is to make it short, maybe clear, one side of and it's not all Republicans and it's not all Democrats. I'm generalizing it. It's the White House that's resisting it. But in short, what I think some of us are trying to say, it's not the money, it's not the amount of money, it's what kind of weapons will Ukrainians be able to purchase with this money. If we give them money and say, well, all we can do is purchase, military boots, socks, and sea rations, well, then, yeah, that's military aid too, but that's not enough. We want to know what kind of airplanes, so what those airplanes are going to be armed with, how many tanks. They were talking originally about 31 M1A1 Abrams tanks, and they said 30. Nobody understood why there was 31 tanks. Then Ukrainians paid for it with our money, with this money that was given to us in those packages for Ukraine. A year passed by, and now they're receiving first tanks that were built for them. Well, it turns out to be that those tanks is M1A1 M1 tanks, not A2 tanks. So they're old tanks. They're tanks of my generation that were in a desert storm. So why do we have to build and sell them those tanks when we already paid once for those tanks, and our Nevada desert is full of thousands of those tanks are sitting there? We could have just given it to them. So this is a huge corruption scheme. And now, of course, before the elections, we're going to end up, saying, okay, well, they failed. We gave them everything they wanted. They kept saying everything is enough, everything is great, and at the end, this is the result. So I think that we should maintain the pressure on our Congress, on our elected officials, to provide sufficient and serious help. This is Rammstein 15 or 17 already. And there is still no anti-aircraft defenses. No, the skies are not closed over Ukraine. So this winter, Russians again are going to be bombarding Ukrainian heating and electric infrastructure. That people are going to be freezing, and the hospitals are going to be freezing. But of course, the attention is drawn away by making sure that Hamas is not being killed so harshly. They don't care that the Ukrainian cities are getting wiped out. They don't care about Ukrainian children somehow, the Red Cross and the rest of those organizations. They worry about the
so, Hary,
Hamas
let me ask
and Palestinian children.
Yeah. Let me ask you about one very important thing. What do you personally associate with the rhetoric that in the future Europe can take on the main burden of helping Ukraine instead of the United States? Could you imagine this situation? I think this is the only one country in the world who can take on the burden on herself, and this is the United States.
Well, I don't know. There's different schools of thought of it. Of course, in the United States, many of us are saying, you know what, Ukraine is Europe. Europeans should pay more attention. While Europeans were not paying their share of NATO and building Northern Stream with Russia to make billions and billions of dollars, while there is Europeans right now that has continued to buy and smuggle Russian oil and price oil up, it'll end up as an American problem. We have our own problems right now. So the other school of thought is, listen, we were one of the guarantors of the Budapest Memorandum. Ukrainians gave up their weapons, so we should stick to our word. Either way, Ukraine will need help, whether it will come from Europe or United States. Hopefully it will be both. There will be like a Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, but also I think that to rebuild Ukraine, but also I think it is very, very important not to forget that Russia is a very rich country. It is, at the end of it, it is Russia that caused all this destruction, death, and suffering for many years for Ukrainians to deal with. It is them that should be paying huge reparations to Ukraine, with the European Union and United States and the entire Western world should apply pressure for the Russians at the end to pay for what they have created. That nightmare for the Ukrainians and for the neighbors, because the neighbors also had to take in refugees and many things. So this is what I hope will happen once Ukraine kick them out of their land.
So, Hary, I know that you often have to comment not only on facts, but also on rumors. I cannot but ask you about some rumors which are treated highly cautiously and at the same time seriously in Ukraine. What do you know about the attempt by Germany and the United States to push Ukraine to sign a peace deal with Putin? Is such a scenario possible, and what are its possible consequences?
Well, I don't think it's a rumor, Caroline. I think it is absolutely true that they're pushing. And this, I think, was the plan right from the beginning. When they were saying that, Ukraine got 3 days before Russia will take over, and it's going to be like this Georgia scenario, it didn't work out. This is going to be almost going into 3 years that Ukraine is able to resist the invasion of this herd. And then it became this land lease. It became, yes, we'll help you. Rammstein 1 will turn the sky and the land upside down to help Ukraine. We'll give Ukraine everything that Ukraine needs, all these promises, but really never delivering on it. Nobody really delivered on any of the promises. Maybe only Great Britain has done it, and of course, Poland. But the rest really didn't do that much. So I think it was then the plan changed. I think originally the plan was, you create an advancement area in Crimea and in Donbass, and have done that. And then Hillary Clinton comes to the White House, and it's going to be a Georgian scenario where they're just going to replace the government in Ukraine, that is going to be pro-Russian. But things didn't go right. The different president ended up taking the White House, which lifted all the sanctions and lifted all the embargoes on lethal weapons for Ukraine, who dropped the oil prices to the point where Russia could not finance themselves, neither could Iran. It was a $35 to $40 a barrel at the time. And so the Russians are set and kept waiting and waiting until, again, friendly governments in Europe and in the United States will come. And the next, again, Obama too came into the White House. The first day they took sanctions off the Northern Stream. They put sanctions on the Keystone pipeline, forbid the development of oil and gas on our fracking gas on our federal grounds. And the oil prices went up to now it's up to $100 a barrel. So that's a lifeline for Russia, for Iran, for Venezuela, for our enemies. So this is when they start gathering the troops And then when the President Biden says, well, if it's going to be large invasion, then it's not good. But if it's not a large invasion, it's okay. So Russians had a green light, took our embassy out of Ukraine. We never took our embassy out of Soviet Union during World War II, out of Moscow or out of the Soviet Union. But this time, before the war even started, we moved our embassy out, meaning, like, come on in, do whatever you want to. But it didn't work out that way. It didn't work out. They didn't expect that the President Zelensky will remain, would not leave, even though he was offered asylum by President Biden twice. They didn't expect that Ukrainian people take arms, and they had lethal weapons now that were given to them. They didn't expect that Russians will not be able to advance as the way they wanted it to. So things went wrong. So now they said, okay, it's going to have to be a war by attrition. The Russians have to take what they have invaded so far. So now they're pressuring Ukraine to say, okay, well, how long can you do it? You've been doing it for a year, no progress. We've given you everything we could, or you wanted it, and yet there is no advancement. So your generals are not very good. Your corruption is so high. Our elections are coming up. So go ahead, sit down at the negotiating table and bring peace. They have done this many, many times, and Israel has fallen for it for decades. And now Israel is resisting it, saying, no, we're not going to negotiate. We're going to end this job. And I think that although it is a different war there than in Ukraine, Ukrainians are fighting an army with airplanes and missiles and tanks. So we should pressure them and say, no, Ukraine should not do that. It's not going to stop the war. It's going to stop the war for a short period of time while our elections are completed. After our elections are done, Russians will regroup, will rebuild their military to better advance, and go ahead and smash Ukraine. So I think this is not a rumor. I think this is the plan that they've had all along to give Ukraine to Russia.
So,
unfortunately.
Yeah, Hary, unfortunately, I don't have any time to continue our interesting conversation, but I do hope that we will have another opportunity to discuss all this, not only this topic. Yes.
I think we should do more. I think we should do more and more in English, so the English-speaking world will hear us, that Ukraine is there, Ukraine is fighting, and Ukraine is standing, and not to give in to just one camp of world politics to sacrifice Ukraine for their political thirst.
Yeah, indeed. So, Hary, thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation. Have a good day. Have a good one. Bye.